Okay, guys, we're going to take a look at the history of telephones. We're going to start from the very beginning and come all the way up to the present day. Many of you already have a cell phone and know what they're used for and the technology, but you probably wonder how phones were used in the past, or maybe you've known family members who had telephones that seemed a little strange to you, very different from today's cell phones. So telephones were invented, or the telephone was first invented by a man named Alexander Graham Bell in the 1870s. Yeah, that long ago. He founded the Bell Telephone Company in 1877, which later became AT&T, a name most of you should know here in the 21st century. And I'm betting most of you see that logo and know exactly what that represents. Some of you may have AT&T cell phones. You may have iPhones, you may have Verizon, you may have Droid, whatever it is. A lot of what you use today is traced back to AT&T, and of course AT&T was the first company to manufacture and cell phones. Now, one of the things that was very interesting about the earliest phones is that people had to make calls through what was called a switchboard. An operator, like the lady you see in the photo here, would take the caller's request for who they wanted to call and then connect them. Of course, now you can perform a Google search on your phone, find a number, and then dial it. Back then, you would have to say, "Miss Sally, I want to get in touch with my grandpa to make sure he remembers to pick me up from school tomorrow." Now, you, of course, can do that directly. That's how much things have changed. So once the telephone became a regular thing in most of American society, something called a rotary phone was invented in 1896. It had up to 9 numbers as well as a 0. And you could dial the phone number you were reaching or trying to reach by using your fingers in each one of the slots that you can see on the phone listed on the right. You may know older family members who owned one of these phones. You may have even seen one and wondered, how in the world does that work? Well, it was actually pretty simple. You just put your finger in the slot of the number you were trying to dial up, and then number by number, you got to the point where you could make your call. And along with the rotary phone came places where people could make calls away from home. They could make them at phone booths, like the illustration you see on the left. And there were also payphones attached to walls, mounted on walls in places like restaurants, shopping malls, courthouses, and perhaps even schools. Then came touch-tone and cordless phones. With a touch-tone phone, all you had to do was just punch a specific button to dial the number that you were looking for. Cordless phones came along in the 1970s, and that allowed people to actually move from one room to another to talk to someone. The only problem with that was you couldn't go past a certain point because then there would be interference. Whereas today, you kids know that using cell phones mean you could talk to someone from just about anywhere with no interference. Again, that's how much things have changed. And now, of course, finally, we have cell phones. Cell phones started out just to be used in vehicles. And then, of course, they became the devices that we use today. Many of today's younger generation, you have grown up using a cell phone. It's something you're used to. It's something that you've always had. So that's a history of the telephone. I'm glad that you spent some time with us, and we look forward to seeing you in the future at the Hemingway Pfeiffer Museum and Educational Center.